All right, today we'll be changing the coolant tank reservoir on my F90 M5. That's this tank right here. The problem with these tanks is they have a seam here where the two plastic pieces, the top and the bottom, are fused together, and they'll start to split over time. Some people say they've had this happen every like 20,000 miles. So you can see a little bit of white coolant around the edge. As it dries, it turns white, and around the base, you can see there I got one stream going down that's dried. So the problem is this coolant drips down on top of the coils in the injectors, and it can melt the coils in the injectors, even get inside the cylinders. So it can throw off the ignition timing, the fuel injection, and even flood the cylinders and cause total engine failure. And there's been a few reports of that on the forums. So we're going to change that tank with a solution that will no longer leak from RK Auto Works. Now this tank obviously is not plastic, and it's bolted together here so it won't be splitting. The tools you need for this job are pretty simple. You'll want some hose clamps. There's 3 connections we'll be taking off and clamping those hoses. You'll want a T30. Yep, T30 star bit, obviously a wrench, and some pick tools to get the hose clip connections off. I hear the difficult part of this job is this sensor. It has 2 prongs that go into the tank, and here you have to cut the old tank to be able to get that sensor out. So we'll see when we get there. First step will be to remove this cover and this cover. Okay, those 2 covers are off. Now we'll remove these 2 lines from their holders and unclip that sensor. You'll also want to feed this sensor wire out of the little grooves on the side of the tank. Before we start taking off the hose connections, we'll actually open the tank and pull out as much fluid as possible with a syringe. All right, this was how much coolant I got out. So quite a bit of coolant in the tank. I used this syringe and that hose to pull out the coolant. You're able to navigate that hose around the back of the level indicator in the tank. So this looks different on the OEM one, but you're able to navigate around the back of it to get to the bottom of the tank. Next, we'll undo these 2 bolts with the T30 bit and lift the tank up, put some rags under it, and then we'll start taking off the hose connections. I have the 2 bolts out. The coolant tank has 2 rubber grommets on the bottom. So you pull the tank up, and I clamped off these 2 lines here. We'll take a pick tool to these clips and then wiggle these 2 connections off. And then lastly, we have a connection down here. I have these 2 connections off. You take a pick tool, put it right under this clip, and pull it all the way up until it clicks like that. And then you can wiggle the connection off. Now with the tank pulled up to the side, we can get a much better look at the side connection. So we'll put one of these clamps on that hose and do the same technique we did on the top with pulling the clip up and wiggling off the connection. Now with this one, you still might have coolant at the bottom of the tank, so make sure you have rags underneath to catch that, and just be ready to tip the tank a little bit and stop the coolant from leaking out. Have the tank removed. Be patient with that bottom connection. It can be a little bit tricky to get that sucker off. Just keep wiggling it side by side, rocking it, and eventually it'll come off. Now we have to remove this sensor. Now, you might be tempted to just take some needle nose pliers and pull on these connections. You might damage the sensor. So what we need to do is chip away at this housing here. So we'll take some needle nose or pliers and start breaking away until we can get underneath the sensor, and then slowly pry it up with a screwdriver. Finally got the sensor out. Here's a look at it. There are 2 O-rings in there that you'll have to pick out and put back on. They look to have a flat side and a curved side, probably just from being pressed into here. I put them on the same direction. Now, it was a pain in the butt to get this out. I ended up using this tool here to grind away at the edge until it was small enough to chip away at with this. So initially I used pliers to chip away the top, but then you get it down to about the level of the sensor, and you can't get under the sensor to pry it up. So I use that tool to shave it down enough to chip away at it with this. And then I was able to get this under it and just wiggle the sensor up. When you put the sensor in the new tank, put the indents angled up like they were on the original tank. And when you're pushing it in there, take a screwdriver at the center, tap the sides as well, and you'll feel a click. You'll feel a click when it sits into place where it should be. Now the new tank's ready to go in. Just follow the reverse order that we took it off. So we're gonna move it into place, connect the bottom connection, then we're gonna do the top two, and then the sensor. All right, we have all the connections on, all the clips pushed down, and the electrical connection on. Now you can actually push the clips down before you put these connections on. And when you slide them on, the clip will be pushed out by the angled nozzle on here, and it'll click when they're pushed in far enough. So I just filled it up to the fill line, and you reuse the stock cap. So we'll put the cap back on. I'll run the car and put the heat on full blast. Then we'll have to let it cool down, and then we'll check the level again. Of course, I'm gonna check for leaks around here and then put the covers back on when we're all done. Everything's put back together. The tank's topped off. Here's a look at the new tank. All right, thanks for watching.